Today on the show, we've got a list of 15 things that everyone thinks are important on social media.
The truth is, a bunch of them don't even matter at all.
So we'll be putting these items into categories: necessary, nice to have, or nonsense.
And by the end of this episode, your church will know what's actually worth your time on social and what's there just to waste your time.
Let's dive in. Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. It's Reverend Randomizer Alexander Mills.
Hello, hello.
And today we're introducing a brand new format of show. It's called Nonsense, Nice to Have, or Necessary.
Wow.
Where we have compiled a big old list of social media building blocks. And we're going to categorize them based on those three categories. And so Alex has the list, and he, true to his name, has randomized them.
I've randomized it.
I don't know what order these are coming. I have seen the list ahead of time. And so we're going to kick it off, Alex, right away. Take us away with the
Let's
first.
do it. So there's 15 of these. Okay. So starting at the top, we're like you mentioned, we're putting them into categories: nonsense, nice to have, or necessary.
Oh, with a bonus, nuanced.
Ooh.
Which
You can't be using that too often.
No. We're not going to do the it depends on every single answer.
So first and foremost, the randomizer is coming out of the gate with personality on social media.
Personality on social media. Okay, so the head of Instagram came out not too long ago, as he tends to do, Adam Mosseri, and he explained that different parts of Instagram actually have different algorithms. And for many, this was an aha moment. So for instance, he said, in the Reels section of Instagram, we're going to have a lot of discovery happening there. He's like, in the Stories section of Instagram, the signals, and that's the term that Instagram uses, the signals that we look for to determine distribution have a lot to do with who you recognize, friends and family, for stories. And so this got me thinking about the quality of personality, but also just like having a human face on your church's social account. Churches ask, hey, what do we do with the pastor versus the church's social account? And so I'm going to put this in the category of nice to have.
Okay.
Because the reality is that not every church is going to have the ability to have their pastor be this big, present face and present personality on social media. But there's another component to the personality quotient, and that would be just, are you a really static, sterile presence on social media? Or are you okay having a little bit of fun? Even something as simple as having the happy birthday to the pastor post every single year shows a little bit of personality. It shows a little bit of humanity. We ran a YouTube video a couple of weeks ago and an Instagram carousel highlighting Pastor Levi Lusko's, in my opinion, best social media post ever. And what he had done was this carousel post, and the very first carousel was this candid photo of him and his wife Jenny at his father's funeral. His father tragically passed away from pancreatic cancer after a long battle with the disease. About a year earlier, Pastor Levi had posted about it. And so he had been sharing, surely with permission, his father's journey with this. And so he had invited people into his life in that way. Yeah. What was really cool about this carousel was that if you swiped through all 14, 15 photos, and for those asking, aren't carousels limited to 10? Some accounts have been experimenting with more. Pastor Levi's surely one of them. Yeah. You scroll through, and it wasn't all dad stuff, like passing away dad stuff, funeral stuff. It was, kids went to tennis practice, work trip, taking photos with people at a conference, family at a hot tub, and they're all just dancing around. And it was all these candid shots. Phone, some of them were blurry. They were all low resolution relative to a professional photo that was taken. And I posted about it because it was this insanely transparent moment, right? It would have been perfectly understandable if Pastor Levi was like, this is too much. I got to keep this private, right? But he was willing enough to open up his own heart and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. And guess what? Here's the whole life experience. And his caption, encapsulated it perfectly. It's this is life lately, joy and sorrow, grief and happiness, just the full spectrum. That is personality.
Yeah.
That's a willingness to be genuine and authentic. And personality doesn't mean being like another pastor you see. That pastor's really outgoing, or that pastor's really transparent, or that person. It can be a real part of your personality, and that genuineness it's nice to have. Because you can still have a pretty good social presence, I think, without it, but you unlock something different when you engage in that.
No, and you're so right about that. It isn't a necessity because, like you said, there are plenty of brands and even churches and even pastors, especially larger pastors on social, who have, by many metrics, successful social accounts without having a whole lot of personality to them. But it is certainly nice to have. I just had this conversation with my sister-in-law this weekend. So she's 10 years older than me. So she is an elder millennial, like just right on the border of not being a millennial. And she is, she's got teenage kids. So she's working through like learning about the apps that they're on and interested in, while not being interested herself, but needing to know like the social landscape. But the plot twist is she just wrote a book, a children's book. And so now she's actually building her own brand as an author online. And when it comes to Instagram, she's familiar enough with the feed, but she said to me on Sunday, she goes, Alexander, like, what are stories? And so I was able to like grab her phone and show her them, and she knew enough to know that they expire. I said, yeah. So I explained stories to her, and what I said to her about, I showed her how to use them, and I said, the way you should use them is to show like just really quick behind the scenes daily life personal stuff. So she was on the back porch and she was grading some papers. And I said, just snapping a photo of this, what you're doing right now, and say like Sunday afternoon, like that's such a great way to use stories. And isn't that how we all use the story feature on primarily Instagram, but some folks are using it on Facebook, is to connect with people personally. It's why when I log onto Instagram, I'm not swiping vertically to go through my feed. I'm swiping horizontally through the stories, because it's the personal connection that draws me to that app right now. And I'm really only finding that in stories. So it is really, really nice to have if you want to take your social account from one level of relationship, if you will, with the folks who follow you to the next. All right, let's stay in the Instagram box, if you will, and let's talk about hashtags.
Hashtags are nonsense. And I'm tired of it.
Okay.
Believe it or not, hashtags were what prompted this entire episode.
Amazing.
Just a way for me to talk about the non-importance of hashtags. Again, Mosseri came out recently on Instagram. People ask, is hashtags a big deal? And he was like, listen, it's not going to make a difference with distribution, but if you want to use them, go ahead.
I saw a tweet the other day that's like, isn't it so great that the platform that invented hashtags, basically, which is Twitter, like they're just not used there anymore at all?
Why is that? Well, when Twitter came around, and it was, 2010 basically, hashtags were a way to categorize content,
right,
so that discovery was possible. Hey, I'm a brand new creator and I like to talk about hashtag, church culture, let's say. I remember back in the day, there was a hashtag called Chisocum. I will give you $100 right now if you can figure out what Chisocum is an acronym for.
I don't even know where to begin. The only thing I can think about is like Rock'em Sock'em action figures.
I feel like if I gave you enough time, you could figure it out. It's in the CHMS type of.
Okay.
So ch for church, sock for social, and M for media.
Yikes.
Hashtag Chisocum was a big part of early Twitter, where we would all talk about churches on social media.
And it worked back then.
It worked because it grouped content. It categorized it. So you could click on that hashtag and find people like-minded that cared about the same things that you did. That's really elementary way of discovery and grouping of content, right? Back in the day, when we got our very first company URL for a product we had, we did video announcements for churches. I bought the URL, provideoannouncements.com. Within about 6 months, we were like a top 3 result in Google. Why? Because Google was like, video announcements, like what should we rank? Oh, I know, a URL with that word in it. That's probably related to this search term. That's how simple search used to be on social platforms, on SEO platforms, on search engines. And then these little robots and these algorithms became a lot more sophisticated, and the need for hashtags and grouping content by that didn't matter anymore. Why? Not because the content in your posts isn't what matters for discovery, but now every post is being mined in the caption. Every video is being transcribed, whether you do it or not. And so the platforms know who needs to see your content, even if you don't include hashtags. The algorithms and the social platforms are so much smarter. So do we include them for all of our clients at socialsermons.com? Yes, why? Because churches care. And it feels like, oh, this is going to matter. We have done the tests. The best posts with the best hashtags, I'll look and it'll say it made a 1% difference in distribution. It's not moving the needle whatsoever. We're going to talk at some point, Reverend Randomizer, about things that churches overlook that like really, really matter.
Yeah.
And hashtags are the inverse. Churches stress over them. What hashtag should I use? What volume of, and maybe because you've heard my content years ago and you're like, Brady, you used to talk about hashtags.
Hashtag
Right.
strategies, yeah.
So social platforms are a lot smarter. They don't need us to be like, this is for this person.
Right.
And so don't stress about them. They are nonsense. They won't make a difference. In fact, it'd be much better if you took that energy and you put it elsewhere. Now, if you look at some of my posts and you see that they have hashtags, I'm just copying over and pasting it from previous ones.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to hurt. They will almost certainly not help either.
Nonsense.
Oh, and also if you're like, remember on Instagram, I'm going to put the hashtags in the first comments.
Yeah.
Again, not
Doesn't
a thing.
matter.
It's not a thing anymore. Doesn't matter. We can move on.
I agree with this so much that just in the last few months, I actually deleted my entire like hashtag research notes
the database.
folder.
Yes.
Where I had all these groups of hashtags that I was like back in, the early days of Instagram, I was working those hashtags and I deleted them. They're gone. So this is nonsense.
Hashtag Chacophum, which is about church coffee mogul.
Okay. Moving on. Using a social media scheduler.
You know what? My hot take is that this is also nonsense.
Wow.
I do not use a scheduler. Do I use a scheduler for all of our social sermons clients? Again, yes, most churches that we work with, and we're working with about like 168 churches every single week, most of them use our scheduler. Now, we use Vista Social as our scheduler because it's great for collaboration. So we can queue up a post for a church and then assign it to them, and then they will review it. If there's revisions needed, they can click the button. Those revisions go directly to their editor, and then those revisions get made. They queue up a new post. They can collaborate. It's also great for when you're working with clients and they're working with folks like us. They don't have to give us their like admin logins. They just queue up their social profiles in the scheduler, and then we both have accounts, and then we can post on their behalf. But if they move on, or if you're working with someone else and like, oh, something goes wrong, they have access. They're an admin on our account. Like, no, you can just like remove your profile from the scheduler account, and then they would lose access to it. So there are reasons why it's good, but as someone that works with this many churches every single week, we encounter so many issues with these APIs. And it's not the scheduler's fault. It's always Meta, or it's YouTube, or it's Twitter, but it's almost always Meta. And it's Meta had an outage where this, we had a church last week who they're like, oh, like my account got locked because TikTok was like, they said I posted something wrong. And we looked at the content, we're like, what? I said, oh, no, it's just the API. TikTok's filters are even more aggressive than other platforms. And the reason is because these platforms want you to post natively.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that we don't have a way to quantify, but there are a couple of reasons why I don't use a scheduler. One, it can cause secondary compression, meaning you can have a post like a video and it gets exported and it's been compressed. And then you upload it to the scheduler and then they compress it again before delivering it to the social platform just to save bandwidth and to make things easier, but it translates. The result is your video doesn't look as great. So I don't like that.
Yeah.
And then the other part is distribution as good when you post natively versus posting with a scheduler? Like I wouldn't be surprised if we found out that posting natively mattered more. And so it's like, I'm just not gonna mess around with that. That being said, and remind me when we get to this thing, there is one thing on this list, one item that I would say matters more than any other. And you can make a good argument that using a scheduler is, for many churches, necessary to affording that specific building block on social.
Okay.
I can do it without it,
Yeah.
but it's a challenge. So if you need to use a scheduler to, again, succeed, excel in this specific part of social, which we'll get to, then I think it's worth using the scheduler. But nonsense, nonsense. I think you could put it in nonsense with like not a hashtag, asterisk with a nuance. Hashtags are dead, remember? With a nuanced asterisk. But for me, like just bad, no good.
You talked about third-party platforms and API. What about Meta Business Suite? Because most churches, if they're active on social, are active on Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram. So that wouldn't be third-party. That's a scheduler baked right into the platform, which, just not as far back as a few years ago, like wasn't a thing. Any scheduler we were using was third-party. What about the Meta Business Suite?
So every time I try to log into Meta Business Suite, it says you don't exist. And I'm like, I'm logged in. They're like, log into Facebook. And then I log into Facebook. And then it gives me this endless loop of it doesn't let me like log in. So I stopped using it for that reason. And I just post directly from my phone. We had a church yesterday and they're like, hey, you sent me a post and I tried to publish it, but like Meta Business Suite doesn't like it. And I was like, I've never heard of this. And they sent me a screenshot and Meta was like, no.
But if you post natively, it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, like just these tools complicate things. Meta Business Suite is famously the worst platform on planet Earth. So I try to keep it as simple as possible because surely if things are difficult for you as a user, there's got to be something on the other side with distribution, with delivery, with discovery. Like you're just adding one more potential kink in the process and you work so hard on a post and I just don't want anything to come in between it. And maybe that's just conspiracy Brady putting his tinfoil hat on. You know, adding hashtags, it's not going to hurt your stuff.
Right.
You might be doing a little bit more than you need to, but it won't hurt. I think that there's like reason to believe that using schedulers, there's enough reason to believe that there's something there that I want to make sure that that's off the table. Social is so complex. There are so many different variables that contribute to whether a post excels or doesn't. I want to remove as many of those variables as possible.
Okay, we're through 3. We're fishing for a necessity here. We haven't hit a necessity yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So number 4, what about vertical video?
Vertical video. Okay, I will say that this is necessary.
All right.
And the reason for that is vertical video is really the format that you're going to see discovery on these days. It's still it's been like this way for about a few years. Don't see it really changing anytime soon because social platforms have pivoted entirely to having this big discovery element. And really the best way to illustrate this is just to think about how you scroll through your feed. Think about the number of creators that you see on your feed that you recognize. It's probably less than half.
Oh, yeah.
Where in the previous era of social, it would have been virtually everyone, literally everyone. Now for users, maybe that means the experience is not as great for us as it used to be. But for creators, that means that every single one of us has like all this real estate where you can show up and be introduced to them for the very first time. It's almost always happening via vertical video. It's not happening through stories. It can happen with carousels. We're seeing Instagram pivot a bit and more carousels. I can look at my insights and see it used to be like when you look at the ratio between who saw this post, followers versus non-followers, for carousels and still posts, it was almost always like 90% plus followers. But I'm starting to see the uptick of non-followers on carousels.
Yeah.
And Instagram has talked about experimentation with carousels even showing up in the Reels feed. And that's what TikTok has done. TikTok has started having still posts in the Reels feed. And so, or in the main feed, which was historically only vertical video. So we might get to the point where we're actually seeing more discovery via still post and carousels. Right now, it's still the vertical video. And so for churches wanting to reach new people, if you're not doing vertical video, and this is why I would contend that it's necessary, you're basically cutting off the clear number one way to reach new people. And it's like, well, that's really the biggest opportunity on social right now. Like there's never been a better time to be doing social ministry. You know, back in the day, you'd publish content and your folks would see it. That's it. Now it's very realistic to reach new people. And those new people are very likely to be disproportionately local to you relative to far away. Huge reason. But if you don't use vertical video, you don't get access to it.
Necessary.
So
good. All right. What about this next one? A little bit of a hot topic. Deleting posts.
Deleting posts. Nonsense. You don't need to do it. You don't need to do it. Now, if there's a post and it's generating a ton of hate and it's not like worth it, you can delete it. I did this the other day with one of our elevation posts.
And somebody asked us about it.
Yes. And for context on this, so I had a carousel and it was on, and this speaks to kind of the distribution element. I published that carousel to Instagram and to TikTok. And then I took the first slide of that carousel and I published it as an image post on Twitter and Facebook with the remainder of the carousel as text in the caption.
Cool.
And I kept it on Instagram, but I archived it temporarily because it was making Instagram unusable and it had reached beyond our audience. You know, it was beyond my control. This was kind of like this, and this never happened to me before. This is the first time it's ever happened. On TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook, I deleted it because it was like not my audience at all. It had just gone like it was nuclear and it wasn't creating anything positive.
Right.
What you'll typically see is a mix. So you'll, I spoke with a church this week and they had a real blow up and they asked me, what should I do with the comments? And I said, well, what's the real? And he sent it over to me. And again, social continues to blow my mind. The real was a pastor talking about the opening of Disney World and how, Walt Disney never got to see Disney World open because Disney World opened after he died. And that was, a pivot to talking about how, hey, we sow seeds in this Christian life. And it doesn't mean that we'll always get to see what's on the other side. And I was like, oh, okay. It's about as harmless as it gets.
Yeah.
People were losing their minds.
I have lots to say about Walt Disney.
Disneyland actually was open before he died. It was like, well, I think we were talking about Disney World. Pedophile. I was like, oh my God. Like, I did not anticipate this.
Yeah.
And so I said, look, okay, this is clearly unhinged. Turn off the comments. And he showed me what turning off the comments looked like. And sometimes when someone's turned off the comments in different UIs, it's really obvious. And you start to think to yourself, I wonder why they turned off those comments. But for whatever reason on Instagram, it doesn't look like that. And it didn't take away from the post. And I was like, yeah, just turn off the comments and like bring them back in like 6 weeks.
Right.
And just remove all the ones that are just, gross and or contributing nothing. Doesn't mean you don't want to, if someone disagrees, like, hey, maybe you have a dialogue. But then some people are just not there to have honest conversations. Yeah. So deleting posts. Sometimes churches also will do this to like clean up the grid. And you just, you might look at a post. I did this the other day. I had archived a post and it's because it performed like half as good as all my others. And I was like, oh, people just didn't resonate with this. It's kind of embarrassing. Like this one has like a third of the likes as like most and like 1/10 of the likes of my best. And I archived it. And then I went back the next day and I was like, this is dumb. Like this still has this many likes. It got viewed this many times. I know this is good stuff. Just because people didn't resonate with it, someone's going to come across this, months from now, and they're going to see it, and it's going to bless them. So we'll leave it there. And so deleting posts, you don't need to do it. It's nonsense. Don't get too hung up on it. The only time it might be useful is if you are going to publish the exact same thing again.
Right.
So if you published something, and I don't know if this is still so much of a thing. It was definitely a thing a few years ago. This is similar, I think, to hashtags where like platforms have probably become more intelligent about this. But the way that algorithms work is when you publish a piece of content, it gets distributed to a small group of people. And depending on how they respond, dictates how much distribution you get from there. And then repeat the process with bigger and bigger groups of people. It's possible that you just got like a bad luck of the draw. And this used to be a thing on TikTok where people would publish, oh, I got 1,000 views. I published again and I got 1 million. And it's like, oh, wow. Like if you have a piece of content and you really, really believe in it and you're like, it should have done better than this. It might be worth deleting it and republishing just to see.
Yeah.
But that's a unique case. The pattern of churches being like, we're going to clear out our Instagram to like promote a new sermon series, and you're going to delete every post, you're going to archive every post just to bring them back. It's like, I mean, sure, I'm sure there are edge cases where that's fine. But
maybe if you post on TikTok or Instagram and you don't get a whole lot of views, and then you post the same content again and you get a bunch of views, maybe it was just you posted at the wrong time. And so our next one, what about post timing?
Post timing is nonsense.
Everything's nonsense except vertical video.
Is that the only one we've got so far?
No, we had nice to have personality out of the gate with personality. Nice to have.
Hey, you got personality? Good for you. That's nice to have. So, nonsense. Again, this is like hashtags.
Yeah.
I don't understand this. Now, there's an old saying in content creation, one for them, one for you. And the idea is if you want to serve an audience well, you can't simply get on your soapbox and only publish what interests you. You need to understand their needs and publish content, create content, teaching education that serves them well. Which is why every quarter I release a new carousel. Best times to post for churches. And we basically run some reports with the churches that we work with across all their accounts. And usually there's 700 social accounts. And we run reports on the ideal publishing times. And we talk about them. And in every single carousel, I get to the 4th slide. And I'm like, and just so you know, this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And every time that post gets like twice as many likes as anything else that we do. And because I think there's an element of certainty that comes with it, right? Social media just feels like shot in the dark. I don't know what. It's so confounding and confusing, all the variables. But this person said that this is the right time to post. So at the very least, I know I'm publishing at the right time. Now, what is the nuance here? If you publish in the middle of the night where you live, that's not ideal. But if you publish during the general waking hours, like this morning, I normally publish, and we'll get to why there actually is an important thing on this list about post timing, kind of, but this is not it. 8:45 versus 9:45. Like normally I publish at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
I finish my writing for the morning. I'm doing creative work from 5 until 9. I get to the end of that. I drop the kids off at school. I come back. I sit down at my computer desk. I publish my post. Today, I just wanted to get it done before I took the kids to school. And so I published it at like 8:15. Guess what? That does not make a difference at all in terms of performance on my posts. If I published it at 12:45 p.m. after lunch and I forgot, would not make a difference. It might not perform as well that day because there are fewer hours for people to see it. But this is not like the previous era of social where you publish a piece of content and within 45 hours, 48 hours, it has gone and disappeared. Good content will be seen by people weeks and months after it was first published. So obsessing over like 8:45 versus 9:12. This scheduler or this report said that these, I don't know. That's nonsense.
Well, and it's some of the things that we've called nonsense in this list in a former time were not nonsense.
Great point.
Like in a chronological feed, it was actually really important what time you posted, because if folks didn't see it, if folks weren't online when you posted it and they didn't see it, then it would depend on them having to scroll through their feed far enough for it to actually come up. And we just know that that's not the world we live in anymore. On Instagram and TikTok famously popularized this. They won't even show you the date or time that the video was posted. Like, you just don't even know.
What do you do? You open the comments and you look at when the comments are
exactly.
to figure
it's like,
out
this
roughly.
was posted in February. It's just because timing doesn't matter anymore, with the caveat that, of course, if you're posting in the middle of the night in the Eastern time zone and most of your followers are in the Eastern time zone, that's not going to work for you. But generally, if people are awake, people are on their phones. People are going to see your post if it's great content. I was using the Meta Business Suite the other day because it does let me
log into it. Yeah, that's great.
And I kind of chuckled out loud because when you go to schedule a post for Facebook or Instagram, they give you an option for active times, and they suggest a time that your users are active, and it's like it's always 10 a.m. and it's like, okay.
When do you normally post?
Well, so I've been using it for posting for church. We just recently started posting again. And so I'm the same as you. I usually post at like 8 or 9 a.m. regardless of.
It's crazy how your audience is active when you post.
Right.
That's insightful.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Beehive does this with our newsletter. Wow. People really respond. Your readers are active around 9 a.m. When I publish the newsletter every Thursday. Yeah. Oh, thanks. No, send this off to the engineers. Give them a tip. Insightful. Right? Like, kudos to the engineers.
Yeah. Post timing is nonsense. Okay, moving on. What about trending sounds?
It's nonsense!
But it wasn't. It wasn't, but it is.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I need you to, so I do a lot of calls with churches.
Yeah.
And something I hear pretty frequently is, it's just so hard to keep up with the changes. And I'm always like confused when I hear that. I'm still not used to hearing it because in my mind, I'm like, look, there was a distinct era of social.
Yeah.
And like now we're in a new distinct era of social. Like, it's like every week something's changing. I was like, I'm talking about the same thing for like 4 years now.
Yeah.
Like the big things that matter have been the same for years, like a half decade. And yet it still feels like this constant change. Why do you think that is? Like, why does it feel that way to folks?
I don't know what that is. And I think the reason that you and I struggle to grasp what that is because it's possible that you and I have a different perspective because we work in this day in, day out. Because the conversation that you just made example of reminds me of the conversations I have with my older sister. She's only 10 years older than me. She is still a millennial, but she has the same perspective of like the digital world. And there's just this divide between me and her only by 10 years. But I'm a digital native through and through, and she's just not quite. Like, they didn't have smartphones in high school, and they were the last generation to not have smartphones in high school. And so I can't exactly put my finger on it, but I see it in the generational divide where the perspective on the digital landscape and in the context of this conversation, the social landscape, these social apps, for folks who are just like one more step removed than you and I, it's such a disorienting, unfamiliar world that's hard for them to grasp. But for you and I, it's like second nature. And I think that just has a lot to do with like the access we had to these platforms, these algorithms, and these devices at an earlier time in our lives.
Yeah,
that's my instinct.
I think because the easy thing to say is, well, you work in it, so you see it all the time.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think it's that. But what you're describing does make sense.
Yeah.
What's nonsense? I know everything's nonsense so far.
Trending sounds. It is currently nonsense.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
In fact, like I don't use them at all. And I see that I've seen this so much more. Like just recently, I think it's Universal pulled all their music.
Yeah.
And
From
so
TikTok.
the whole Drake and Kendrick back and forth on TikTok, what you have to do, and all of Taylor's songs are the same, is you have to pitch shift it to use it. Because that's a way that it somehow, you'd think, again, platforms would be smarter than this. Like, oh, Drake's singing a bit lower. Can't be him. You just pitch it down like an octave, not an octave, a step.
Yeah.
And now you can play it without the filters detecting that this is copyright. If you use a sound in your post that then gets removed, the entire sound of your post is removed, including your voice, including anything else that you add. And I've seen this a lot lately where you go through a post and they won't put it on the feed because they will not serve in discovery a post that has no sound. The platforms have smartened up. They used to serve them with sound and they quickly fixed that. So I'll go to a creator and I'll be like, oh, look, this post has like a lot of views. It must be one of their most popular. I want to learn from it. And then it's silenced. And it's crazy. I'm thinking, that was their most viewed post ever, and it was silenced. It happened to mine. My most viewed post ever on TikTok has, please hold.
Okay.
Looking it up. Because I had noticed this the other day. My most viewed TikTok, 1.6 million views. Let's take a listen.
I was just going to say, you're turning your volume all the way up, and it's silent.
Now, luckily, I have captions on, but not through the whole thing. So it's silent. 126.9 thousand likes.
And it's a tutorial on DaVinci Resolve.
And it's a pinned video, which I should really unpin.
You've got some work to do.
Because I just unpinned it. Because
can you see when you posted that?
Like 4 years ago.
Right. So again, like leveraging back in a. This is why I said it's nonsense now, and it wasn't nonsense in a previous era.
But if you used a Taylor song 4 weeks ago, and then Universal pulled it, you'd. And Universal has so much music.
It's crazy.
And maybe it'll come back once they and Meta and or TikTok work through their differences, or maybe not. And this is why when you use a trending sound, one, it doesn't distribute and contribute to discovery anymore. Like in a small way, maybe more than hashtags, but it's very similar to hashtags. Like if you make good content, it's going to be found. It's not like you use that one. Now, okay, that's not entirely true. Okay, there's been this trending post where people do the trust fall. Have you seen this? So someone does a trust fall, and then at the last second, the person that's supposed to catch them lets them fall and goes, don't rely on man. Rely on God. We'll see you at church this Sunday. And
it's hilarious.
A lot of churches have published this.
Yeah.
And guess why? Because it probably is their best performing post.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I've already seen people being like, enough. I don't want to see any more churches inviting me to their church. Because why? I get it's crazy. Churches are still anyway.
It's all nonsense.
This is the equivalent of Facebook ads that are like, come to Easter Church, Louisville, Kentucky. But I live in Canada. Because people are like, we'll see you in New Orleans. And I'm like, I don't, the 200,000 likes. You're like, okay, this surpassed local distribution. Hopefully it got a ton of local distribution as well, but it's gone well beyond that. So you can see distribution by jumping on trending sounds like that. So if you're following a specific trend, that's this summer's trend. Last summer was the Wes Anderson one. If you're doing that very specific viral trend, sure.
Yeah.
If you're taking a sound just to add as your backing track, just be careful because there's a potential that it gets banned. I still do it on TikTok because I post carousels, and so they'll make you add a sound to a carousel, and you won't want it to be silent. Guess what? If they silence my carousel, that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's all text, so they can still read it. I don't add sound on carousels to Instagram because I hate scrolling through and seeing a carousel and have my audio on, and then suddenly it's really loud music. So nonsense. Man, I'm getting sorry. This is what happens when you randomize the order.
I know. Well, and that's interesting, right? Because there's trending sounds as a category, which is this sound is super hot, whether it's a meme or whatever it is. But then there's also just your standard post that you want to post, whether maybe it's a sermon clip, but you want to put some nice backing music.
Don't do it.
There is risk inherent with using any sound built into the app that's even not a trending sound. And so do you have a recommendation if churches want backing music? Should they be adding it, baking it into their video before they upload it to TikTok?
Oh, you're really
is that nonsense?
I mean, I just don't add a sound.
Right, you don't need it. It doesn't add anything, right?
No, and if we've talked about this before, the value that churches have with their recorded sermons is a real live event where a pastor is preaching to a group of real people. It is not staged. It is not scripted.
Yeah.
And so it breaks down people's barriers when they see it because they are confident. They believe that you're not trying to sell them something. Like this was a real thing that happened. I can like let my guard down for a moment and just watch this. Whereas like when we all scroll on social now, we all have to have our guard up. It's like, okay, what's this really about? What are you trying to say? Like, okay, like we take everything with a grain of salt. Now we've learned to filter it that way. And this is one way to bypass that filter. Unless you dress up that post.
Right.
And adding music back into it removes this component of a church's sermon that is like its best part. And now you're undoing that ability to get past people's filters because you're adding this music that people will perceive as, okay, you're trying to create and elicit something. And this is all happening subconsciously.
Exactly.
It's not like people are like, I have recognized this. And the same as when you like add a bunch of like, you know, fancy filters and grids to it. Just post it as it is. Yes, it's not as glossy. That's working to your advantage, not to your disadvantage. The bigger problem, and this is the biggest problem we actually have, is when the best part of the sermon is during a time when the pastor has said, I'll have the worship band. Please come to the stage. And we're trying to cut together a sermon, and there's just this pad going the whole time. So you gotta say,
you can't chop it
like,
up.
okay, well, I guess we can't chop this up at all. So
Okay, so don't experiment with trending sounds. Maybe don't experiment with sounds at all. What about this one? Experimenting with new posts.
Necessary.
There we go.
So our axiom for this has been and will be: repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test.
There you go.
Continue to test is such an important part of that principle on social. If you go to my Instagram, you will see high contrast carousel posts, big, huge hooks, same 3-4 color combinations over and over again, same designs over and over again. Why? I'm just repeating the best.
Yeah.
Folks love this style of content. It's our best performing. I've been doing it for a year now. It's showing no signs of slowing down. It keeps accelerating. So as long as it does that, I am going to forget the rest. I have experimented with other kinds of posts that have been flops, and I'm not going to force that when I have a winning formula. I am going to continue to test because there was a time about a year ago
Where you weren't doing these carousel posts.
and I was precisely.
Yeah.
And so you never know when the next thing you try, you're going to stumble upon something great. Now, it doesn't need to be a huge percentage of the content that you make. 10% maybe, trying something new here and there. And it also doesn't have to be an entirely new post format. You can experiment with a change, an augmentation to an already winning formula. This is like the classic A/B test. Sometimes we will have posts that are just, most of the time, those covers of the carousel, just text and a plain background. Sometimes I'll be like, let's try to add an image. Does this hurt or does it help? And then if that's the only change that we make, it's not a perfect test because every post is its own thing, but we can say, okay, we continue to test. We tried this slight differentiation. I always have an end slide. It's like, well, hey there, I'm Brady. Save this post if you liked it, like it, share it with your friends. Is that a throwaway thing? I do it on every post. Is it necessary? So we'll try one without that, and then we'll look at the number of saves. It's like, oh, yeah, when I tell people to save it,
they do it.
50% more save it. So let's keep reserving an entire 10% of this this carousel, because I only have 10 slides right now, for that invitation, because it makes a big difference. So repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test. Necessary.
Great. Feeling good that we kind of climbed out of that dark hole we were in.
Well, for now.
Experimenting with new post formats is necessary. What about comment moderation?
It's necessary.
Yes.
It is necessary. A couple elements to this. This would include responding to comments.
Yeah.
So just like being active in the comments. That is going to be a positive signal for the algorithms. A positive signal is what platforms like Instagram, the word that they use to describe the elements that contribute to distribution. So the more positive signals, the more likely your content is going to be distributed to more people and be discovered by more people. A person commenting on your post is a positive signal. You replying to them in a timely manner is a positive signal.
More than just an emoji, please. More than just a single emoji.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like to choose, and this might not be relevant for every single person, but as comments come in the first hour, I keep a really close watch on them. I'm liking them, and I'll always pick one or two to respond to when I know I can add value.
Yeah.
And then when I go back later, it always turns out that post is the one highest in the comments that are being ranked because people found value in my reply, or they found value in the person's original comment. I'll pin comments that I think are really valuable from people. I'll pin criticisms of the post and then give a very candid but not at all cruel reply, so that people can say and that I love this. Like, I'm so glad they post that. People read through something. Clearly, there was an objection that I didn't address preemptively in the post. And so somebody said, well, what about this? This is a bad idea because of this. And then I respond. I'm responding for that person, kinda. I'm really responding for the 1,000 people that will read that. You know, for the one person that commented, there's going to be 100x more people that actually read your response. So they get to see, what would a church say when a person said this to them?
Yeah.
How would they respond when someone said this to them? The other side of this is that you used to just be able to like hide comments or just leave them up. You got to be a lot more active when posts start reaching new people, especially in the church world.
Yeah.
You know, you could say, Mickey Mouse is a mouse, and people would say, you're a pedophile.
Yeah, let me tell you about Disneyland.
It's like, oh, wow, okay. Like, the most innocuous things will still rile people up. So that means blocking people. It means deleting stuff. You don't want your comment section to devolve into chaos, because what will happen then is it's not going to be a positive signal. People aren't even watching your content. They're really just like looking at the outrage, grabbing the popcorn bucket and enjoying the comment section, which isn't edifying to them. It's not edifying to you. It's not useful to the social presence that you're trying to create. So sometimes you need to moderate those comments, even if it means fewer positive signals. Some people would say never delete a comment. For churches, I'm of the belief when it gets cruel, when it gets nasty, and other creators in the secular world that used to be like, all news is good news, have been like, okay, well, that's not true. Clearly, there's some things. One of the comments that I get on most posts in the first hour is someone saying that they're contemplating suicide. It's not real. It's a bot. I delete it every single time. You know, you can make the case, well, that's one extra comment. That's one more positive signal. It's like, no, that's a negative signal. And even if it wasn't a bot, when someone gets cruel, when someone gets harsh, when someone is just, you know, out of pocket, you know, profanity, cursing, whatever it might be, blaspheming, it's just delete. And it's worth losing that positive signal to keep the comment section non-chaotic.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. Your comment section is your living room. Okay. Your social profile is your house. Your comment section is your living room. If someone's going to come in and tear the living room apart and start throwing stuff and tearing down the TV and smashing the walls and, you know, urinating on the cushions, I'm going to say get out, because no one else is able to enjoy themselves here.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to have discourse, that's perfectly fine. This is not censorship, though it's also my house. So if I wanted to censor your opinion, I could leave my house. That's the whole point. Go to your house.
Yeah.
So comment moderation, being active, and also making sure that other people can find value in the comments. Don't let it devolve into people grabbing the popcorn and just like feeding the negative parts of us that just want to see people fight.
Yeah.
That we don't want a church to contribute to that part of online culture.
Well, and this is the pastoral element of it, right? And we've been advocates of this for a long time, using social media as a means for ministry, not just to push more content into the world and just set it and forget it, but like to have real people, very likely real pastors on the other end of these social accounts, whether it's a senior pastor, associate pastor, youth pastor, on the other end of these social accounts, both in the DMs and in the comment sections, responding to real people, responding to folks the way that we would if they were in our sanctuary, the living room of our church, right? And so it takes for some it takes a little bit of a perspective shift just to approach social in that way as a means for ministry. But we just believe that's the best expression of using social in a church context, is using it for actual ministry, which looks like sometimes pastoral care in the comments, whether that's responding or deleting, moderating. That's what it takes to lead people into health and wholeness, into their next steps with Jesus. So that's what that is all about. This next one.
What number are we on?
We're coming into number 10.
Okay.
I'm excited to talk about this one because you've been using this one for a while, encouraged me to use it, and I gave it a shot a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And had great success with DM Auto Replies.
Oh, this is a nice to have.
Yeah.
Now, this is also a thing that I could see in 12 months just not being a thing anymore.
Right.
It really does feel like oh, wow, this is different. It is going to be extremely effective for a short period of time. DM automation is when you make an invitation to folks, either in the caption or in the post itself, to comment a keyword, and a DM will be sent to that person automatically. So how did you use it?
So the app I use is called ManyChat, the one that you use as well.
MANY chat.com. So like lots of chats, many chats.
And it has this direct API with Meta. And so it's not janky. It's like, it feels really good to use.
They are an approved partner.
Yeah. And one of my most popular pieces of content on Instagram and on my coffee blog is how to clean your coffee grinder. Anytime I post a story, I usually do it on a Saturday morning. It just says, hey, this is your reminder to clean your coffee grinder.
Yeah, I don't like
Everyone responds. They're like, yeah, you know what? I've been neglecting it. This is the sign I needed. So I've got a guide on my website, how to clean your coffee grinder. So I did that post on the feed. I said, hey, this is your reminder. It's time to clean your coffee grinder. And if you want to learn how, just comment clean in the comment section and I'll send it to you. And so got a bunch of comments, sent out a bunch of DMs automatically. I didn't have to do anything. Setting up the automation in ManyChat was really like easy and intuitive. And so not only did I equip a bunch of people with that resource, which led more traffic to my blog, which is sweet, but it opens up a door in a DM conversation with plenty of folks that I've never actually talked to in the DMs. So my experience with ManyChat was awesome. I think you can have 1,000 contacts for free or 500 contacts for free.
Okay.
So I've only used it the one time, but it was completely free. I didn't have to pay for it or anything. So that's how I used it. And it just felt really cool. And it felt good to me because leading people to next steps through the Instagram feed is notoriously challenging. Because you can't post links. You can tell people to do stuff. But unless they go out of their way to actually do it, by like leaving the app, going to Safari, searching my coffee blog, they're just not going to do it. It's different from the stories where I can include a link and they can just click on it. So being able to send them my site from just a simple comment on the post, that felt really awesome to me. And I can see how that would be really useful for churches, because if you're gonna be posting short form sermon content to your Instagram feed, to your reels, and the discovery algorithm is going to pick these up, and some of these sermons are going to go off, they're going to reach a lot of people. You want to be leading people to a next step. So whether it's watching the rest of the sermon or downloading your church's guide to how to be wise with money, or whatever it is, to be able to have to be able to remove a hurdle for them to take their next step with Jesus from that piece of content. I could just see this tool being really useful for churches, with the caveat, of course, that it does continue to be useful and doesn't fizzle out over the next year or so, like you have hypothesized.
Yeah, you got me thinking about ideas now. I'm writing them down. Okay. So I did a post today, and the title of this post is Free Church Mini Movies. And this is what's interesting. So the whole point of this post is to highlight recent guest on the show, Benjamin Suter's nonprofit, where they give away free church mini movies that are awesome. The URL for this is bravingbird.com. I put that URL in the video. I say it out loud. I put it in the caption. I tagged Braving Bird. As of now, there's already 400 comments.
Right.
People, because at the end I go, just comment video and I'll DM you the link.
Right.
400 people already.
They chose to do that instead of the other thing, which is go to Safari.
The other
type
things.
Of thing. Yes. Yeah, right.
Go to Braving Bird. They're tagged right here. It's right there. You can see. You don't have to go to. It's just right there. Or type in the URL. You're gonna go to your DMs and then click it. Like it seems like it wouldn't work this well. Is what I'm getting at. And yet, people seem to like this. Now, sometimes people will do it where they'll only give you the link if you comment, and I don't like that.
Right.
Like sometimes on a cooking recipe, people will be like, comment a recipe and I'll send this. And I'm like, well, just tell me where it is. I'm not going to freaking comment recipe. Other times they'll say, hey, you can find the link to the recipe in my bio, or comment recipe and I'll send it. I'm like, great. So then you have the option either way. It
doesn't feel like gatekeeping.
It's just surprising how many people choose to use this because they're commenting publicly and they're getting that link. And again, it's working awesome. So this is a nice to have. You can add this. It does cost money, but there's also a free plan. So depending on how you want to use it, with the paid plan, you can select the trigger be the next post I publish. Whereas on the free plan, you have to choose from an existing post.
Yes. So
that's like one little barrier where you have to publish and then go turn on the automation. For most accounts, that's not going to matter probably. Like as long as you get it done in 30 seconds, like people won't be finished watching the video or reading the post before they get that. But that is one nice part of the paid plan. Nice to have for sure. Though I will say, again, if we had the crystal ball for 24 months from now and we're like, remember DM automation? I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, so that one's nice to have. This next one is nonsense. It's the grid aesthetic.
I got a DM yesterday about this. And if this person is listening, I apologize. Because I wrote out a response of like, grids are dumb.
Yes.
And then I wrote back and I was like, here, because they're like, hey, I have a really good grid pattern.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, it's in the shape of a cross.
Yeah.
It's like, it's been great. But I'm kind of bored of this grid pattern. And so I'd like to create a new one. How do you make a break from the old grid pattern and get a new one? And I went on my soapbox. I wrote like a million things about like, what are you talking about? And then I just deleted it and I said, I would do 3 kind of like palette cleansing posts. So a straight line and then you start it.
There you go. Do your grid.
And I was like, this guy is thinking so much about his grid aesthetic.
Yeah.
How much energy is going into like the post?
Right.
Because
That's it.
the grid aesthetic is becoming the number one motivator for this post design. And, you know, be darned the post design's performance and whether or not folks are responding to it, whether it's stopping the scroll, so long as it, you know, affords the grid aesthetic that I'm trying to accomplish, it's worth it. It's like, no, like that is so backwards. That's so upside down. You know, unless, and here is the important thing to consider. I probably neglected the look of my grid longer than I should have because it was a principle that I held. Here's what I mean by that. If you go to my grid, I do not publish a reel without a very nice cover that I've designed. All the Instagram carousels are, of course, really nice designed covers already. So it's clearly my branding, my face. It looks pristine. I don't have a pattern, but it looks nice.
Yeah.
Although my team pointed out that the carousels are usually a color and then the reels are me in the studio. And, you know, by the grace of God, it had created a cross.
Thanks be to God. Yeah.
Joke's on you. That was intentional. Maybe he saw my cross. In the DMs.
He's like, how do I do this, Brady?
So what were we talking about?
You neglected it for too long.
Right.
Yeah.
If your audience is primarily creative people, the grid will matter to them.
Right.
So it will matter to your audience. And so it's worth doing that because it's one of those non-verbal signals where if they see that you have a sloppy grid, they're going to be like, oh, you know, that's not really how we do it in this community.
Yeah.
So for me, I probably should have had a nicer grid because it potentially, you know, we're talking about things on the margins here, could have turned people off when they visited my account. They're like, oh, this grid isn't so nice. I'm a church creative. Like, I would expect things to look a little bit better. For churches and their congregations, nobody cares about this. There are no reasons to care about how your grid looks or the pattern within the grid. If you're a youth ministry, you can make the case for it. But if you are a church, 99% of people in your audience, let's be conservative, 90% are not folks that care about social media. They are people like Alex's sister that he's talking about.
Right.
Like Alex's sister is not registering like grid aesthetic.
Right.
She's just being, I stopped the scroll because this was a bright color.
Yeah.
It still surprises me how often I go to YouTube and I see these highly successful channels and I'm like, this is a design. That's a choice. That's a choice. I'm not the audience for that. And I'm in this small like circle of like, this is how things are supposed to look. But for most churches, your audiences will not care. So there's 2 reasons why this is nonsense. 1, churches get hung up on it. You're spending mental energy and creative energy trying to improve something that does not impact performance.
Right.
And then secondly, I had a secondly. My answer is nonsense now.
I mean, this is just so much nonsense that the second answer is just because it is. It's just nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, either way, you're wasting the one reason. We'll go with the one reason. You're wasting time and energy creating it, and you're getting distracted from what matters.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. What about having the same handle across all social platforms?
It's nonsense.
Not even nice to have.
Not even nice to have. Because here's the thing. This used to matter so much because it was, again, older days of searches on social. If you didn't have the exact handle, it was hard to find what you were looking for.
Yeah.
And nowadays, you can just find things so much easier.
Yeah.
And so these handles, like we don't really use handles anymore. They don't really matter in tracking people down. And the reason I say it's nonsense is because it's almost impossible now to find good ones that are the same across every platform. So if I said nice to have, people listening would say, okay, it's nice to have. And they're like me and you. Like, nice to have. I'm the type of person that has nice to have for me is necessary, right? And I don't want people to feel that way.
Yeah.
Because social is so big now. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Like we were setting up a new instance of Beehive, which is our newsletter for Nucleus this week. And they're like, oh, what do you want your subdomain to be? And I was like, nucleus.beehive.com. They're like, you wish? I was like, who created a newsletter for Nucleus?
Yeah.
There's like some other company.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay. So even platforms like that are saturated. Like Nucleus was a really tough one. We have Nucleus websites. We have Nucleus. Like, I was like, okay, Nucleus.church across all platforms. Not available. What?
Somebody's out there mining all of our usernames.
Right. Perhaps. And so I was just okay. This is not worth the grief.
Yeah.
Again, you get hung up on it. Like, oh, we'll change it. And what tends to happen is you, for the sake of uniformity, go with a worse overall handle,
Right.
so that you can get it everywhere.
Right.
And it's like, okay, like that wasn't worth it. So nonsense.
Yeah.
Don't stress.
All right. What about reusing content? We've talked about this a little bit already.
I'm going to say necessary.
Okay.
I'm going to say necessary in the discovery era because we have talked in the past about the importance of your content emergency fund, which is the idea that there will be days and weeks where you are not feeling especially creative or you just don't have the time to come up with new content. If you are publishing consistently, though, you will surely be able to look through your content in the past and be like, okay, here is the top 10% of performers. Once it's been 6 months, and that's kind of my timeline for this for me, once it's been 6 months, I'm okay publishing again. Great example of this morning. I sat down and I had to write 4 carousels. And I just was not in that creative mood because Alex had already DM'd me and he had me do all these things for him.
I'm so sorry.
They were newsletter related. And then I tried to create a newsletter and it said, oh, your username's already taken. And I was like, this sucks. And I just didn't have the energy. So I went through to my Instagram and I went back 6 months and I was like, okay, what of these can I repurpose? And we were using old branding colors then. And so I'm going to redesign them, but I use the identical wording. And 6 months from now, I wouldn't be surprised if I literally published the identical post again, because discovery algorithms mean you're always reaching new people. That potential exists. The sad part, you're always not reaching people that follow you. The likelihood that people see every single post you publish is 0. Your most ardent followers. How many of your posts do they see? Depends. Like probably there are some that see every one of them, but it's such a small fraction. And so you think people have already seen this. 1, they haven't seen it. 2, they forgot it. It was 6 months ago.
Well, that's it. With the amount of information that we intake nowadays and the amount of advertisements that we're bombarded with, even if all of your followers saw that post 6 months ago, surely they will not recall that they saw that post when it comes across your feed again, especially if it looks differently. And I know this to be very true in the discipline of like preaching. Sometimes you preach like a really good sermon and you just feel like, oh man, I wish I could preach that again. And it's like, well, you can, because people need, especially in the content, we're talking to churches using social media. People need to hear and receive the things that we're posting about over and over and over again, because it is by nature spiritually formative. So if you posted a really good post about the 3 secrets to fervent prayer 6 months ago, post it again and redesign it if you want, or don't, because it really doesn't matter. But you have the freedom, the liberation to post it again because the content is good. You've proven that by the metrics. You've gone back and said, okay, this post really went off. The content is good, but it's important for the folks who are following our accounts, who are being discipled through our social ministry, to be spiritually formed in these areas. So remind them. Yeah, we talked 6 months ago about prayer, but remind them. It's okay to remind them again. Yeah, these are the 3 tips to fervent prayer, and folks will receive that again and again and again.
And if it was one of your top performers, it's probably one of those things that when people see it again, they're like, yeah, this is still true.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my top performers are like more emotional based, where it's like, hey, your church is doing a good job. Keep going. Like,
Yeah, people need to hear that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I probably should post it every 3 months, honestly.
Yeah. All right, we're coming to the end here. We got 2 left.
And we still haven't said the most important one.
Right.
Until now.
And no nuance.
One nuance. That's good.
Flirted with the nuance a little bit.
That's good, because you know me. I think for people to take action, nuance makes it harder for them.
Yeah. What about no weeks off?
Let's go! Necessary. More necessary than any other item on this list. So much so that I wish the randomizer had made it the last one.
It was
That would
pretty
have been
close. It was
so
pretty
poetic.
close.
This is how you know we really used a
Yes.
randomizer. Who would put it second to last? I talked about post timing being nonsense. And that was in relation to 8:45 a.m. versus 12:45 p.m.
Right.
And you post in the waking hours, you're fine. What does matter is a consistent publishing calendar, aka no weeks off. Showing up every single week and making sure you've got content going out. So that meaning it's okay if you compromise on some of the other positive signals.
Yeah.
If you ensure that no weeks off stays maintained. This should be the ultimate North Star, the ultimate objective before anything else. The way that we do it on a platform like Instagram right now is, hey, 2 carousels and 2 reels per week. They're typically getting published Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Because churches work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and everyone's got either a day off on Monday or a day off on Friday most of the time. And so we are publishing during the waking and working hours of the community that we are trying to reach. We do that every single week. And so people see our content, and then we publish next week at a similar time, and the algorithm's like, this person liked this person's post last week at this time. Let's show them this person's post this time of this week. If you take weeks off, you lose that momentum. And all of these other things become secondary because you haven't been able to achieve the core level, like the first thing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, before we can actually start writing sentences, we need to learn how to read. You cannot skip this introductory step. And unlike a skill like reading that you acquire once, or riding a bike and you have it for the rest of your life, this is rent that's due every single week. You're not an influencer. You don't need to go to brands and say, this is how many impressions we can get you. This is how many views that we can get you. And so publishing 3 times a day, ultimate quantity just for the sake of it, does not matter. But showing up every single week does. Bare minimum, twice per week. If you can get up to 5, 6, 7 times per week, even more, go for it. But remember, once you get past kind of 2 per week, you don't want to drop quality just to post more.
Right.
And this is the really tricky thing. What does quality mean, Brady? Well, it's purposely ambiguous. You know, your view of quality today will be different than your view of quality in a year from now. And your view of quality today is almost certainly different from my view of quality. I would like to publish more than 4 times a week on Instagram. And perhaps in a year or 2, we'll be able to get there. But right now, this is kind of all that we can output while maintaining the level of quality that I want. But no weeks off. Necessary, more necessary than anything else we've talked about.
And that sounds like a tall task to some, especially for folks who aren't accustomed to that type of rhythm. But this is where that emergency fund that you just briefly alluded to, this is where this comes in, where if something is happening at your church, maybe there's an illness or vacation or something occurs where you are looking ahead at the week and you're realizing, we just don't have the bandwidth to create great content this week. It looks like we're going to fall off the wagon here. Well, that's when you reach into your emergency fund, which is either some posts that you've created that you just never posted and are kind of like the way you put away money for like an emergency fund for when your roof inevitably goes or whatever, or you reach deeper into the bag for one of those posts from 3, 6, 9 months ago that did really well. You just refactor it and repost it. So that's where reusing content fits in there as well. Number 15.
We made it.
Kind of a downer because number 14 was really what we were building up to, but thanks to the list randomizer. Listen, it's the randomizer's world. We're just living in it. What about DM automations?
We did this one.
Well, we had DM auto replies, and this one says DM automations.
Oh, I answered DM auto reply as DM automations.
Okay.
DM automations, nice to have. DM auto reply is complete nonsense.
Okay.
So we'll do that one now.
Okay. DM auto replies.
DM auto reply.
Right.
Hopefully that wasn't confusing to folks. DM auto reply, this is so funny. The number of times that people respond to my posts where I have DM automation activated. So for instance, comment video and I'll send you the link. They comment video. I send them the link automatically with my DM. They then reply to me, thanks for your message. We'll get back to it later.
Oh, no, this is a DM auto reply.
Auto
Right.
reply. Nonsense.
Absolutely not. What's worse than nonsense? Stop it with this.
Yeah, this does not help anyone.
Yeah.
I understand. I understand the motivation. The problem is it so frequently doesn't work how it's intended.
Yeah.
The way that it's intended is when someone reaches out, you want to let them know, hey, we've got this and we will get back to you. Hold tight.
Right.
But in the real world, it ends up firing at inopportune times, and then it removes the human element that should be present in the DMs. And so it actually creates reason for skepticism. It creates reason for people to be a bit more standoffish in the DMs and just assume, is this a real person? Is this not? Because you're giving them reason to believe it's not a real person.
Right.
And as the AI chatbots become more and more prolific, this is the type of thing that people are just going to assume. And so if you give them reason to believe it, like you've already kind of removed that human element. In the DMs is where pastoral care should be happening.
Right.
If you're introducing these kind of like robotic replies and auto replies, you're kind of stripping away that possibility to begin with.
Yeah. Nonsense. Agreed.
Nonsense.
We made it. 15.
Mostly nonsense. it
Randomized
seems.
and rated.
Let us know if you liked this format of episode. Necessary, nice to have, nonsense, a little bit of nuance sprinkled in. We can certainly apply it to video, to website, to comms, to really any.
I can't wait
area.
to apply it to websites. We're doing that episode regardless of what the people say. We're doing that one.
Okay. Well, thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust, but not your opinions, apparently. And we'll talk to you next Wednesday.
You don't use Safari on your phone?
I do, but I hate it, and I hate Chrome. I hate everything.
Well, most things don't work when you need them to work.
Why does nothing work? What do I like? I want to be positive today. Spotify's pretty good.
I can't.
Okay.